Part 3, Chapter 1. Winston sits in a cell where light shines continuously and the cell is bare. He has actually arrived at a place where there is no darkness and he is monitored by 4 telescreens. He has shared it with a man named Smith, the cell. The woman wonders if she is Winston's mother. And Winston envisions his capture, beating and inflicting much pain on him, which will force him betray Julia. Ampleforth, a poet, is also caught and brought in because of leaving the word God in a Kipling's translation and tossed into the cell. He is immediately taken to the dreaded room 101, a room full of despicable, unspeakable, and mysterious horror. Coincidentally, Winston shares his cell with many other prisoners from all walks of life, including Mr. Parson, his neighbor. Ironically, Mr. Parson has been turned in by his own children for committing third crime. Winston senses that he will be subjected to starvation, beating, and deprivation, pushing him to hope that the Brotherhood will send him a razor blade which he might use to commit suicide. His dream about the much desired help from the Brotherhood is shattered when O'Brien enters the cell and declares that he is an operative of the Ministry of Love. He also asserts that Winston had known all along who he was, and Winston admits that it is true. A guard smashes Winston's elbow, and Winston thinks that no one can become a hero in the face of physical pain because it is too much to endure. Winston is first taken to a holding pen that has common criminals and political prisoners. Surprisingly, common criminals fight back and resist, whereas the political prisoners simply stay quiet and do not react because they already know that their fate. They know they will be vaporized. He discusses their crime with Ampleforth before the latter is taken to the dreaded room 101. Winston thinks about Julia and what might have happened to her. He believes that she is under torture and she is undergoing suffering with some excruciating pain. He resolves to take double the pain so that she can be spared, but realizes that that is just an intellectual decision. Winston is surprised at the end that O'Brien has betrayed him. The events in this chapter are the realization of an inevitable which he had been made known from the beginning. Winston is caught just as he had known at the moment he had begun writing in his diary. He had also predicted that he will end up being held at the Ministry of Love. Nevertheless, he had never thought he would be there with people who are supposed to be beyond reproach. For example, Ampleforth, an intellectual and dreaming creature, whereas Mr. Parson is a highly enthusiastic party supporter who seems to embody every quality and spirit of the party and what the party seeks from him, the outer members. Ampleforth figures out that he is incarcerated because he had left the word God at the end of a verse to achieve rhyme. Here, Orwell broaches the theme of oppression, of writers, and free thought of creativity. Writers are not free to express their minds in the way that they want to. Orwell continues to advocate for creative freedom when he asked in some of his essays, even under the tightest dictatorship, cannot the individual writer remain free inside his own mind and distill or disguise while will be too stupid to recognize them? This question is part of to test. And Ampleforth suffers the consequences because a writer cannot remain free under totalitarianism. Free expression of one's opinion has no place under such regimes. We should take note of Winston's insinuation to take Julia's pain, which comes back to haunt him. It foreshadows the critical event that eventually takes place between Winston and O'Brien, justifying Winston's allegiance to his own feelings. Winston's pronouncement makes him to understand the gap between saying one thing and actually doing it. Saying one thing and actually doing it. Winston and O'Brien have allegiance to one another, but this allegiance had been betrayed. Winston's pronouncement makes him to understand that you can say one thing and mean something else, which is, of course, the philosophy of thinking in Oceania. Winston knows that he loves Julia, but he does not know what he feels for her at that moment. The beginning of the end gets closer, and the fact that Winston's love for Julia is transforming into an intellectual exercise rather than a feeling of the heart foreshadows the change that occurs within Winston once O'Brien is through with him in the torture chamber. Winston now fully understands that the ministry of love is the place where there is no darkness, because the lights never go out there. Ironically, Winston had taken his premonition to mean something much the opposite, a place where life will be better than within the party. This marks the beginning of his physical torture and his journey to hell.